Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the New Mutants number 97, cover dated January 1991. This is X-Tinction Agenda Part 8, the penultimate chapter of the crossover between Uncanny X-Men, New Mutants and X-Factor. The cover is by Rob Liefeld, penciled and inked by himself, and it really is from the school of fill the whole page with these hulking figures of Cable and Wolverine. Of course, one could comment on the questionable anatomy on Wolverine's forearm there, or how his shoulder connects to the middle of his bicep there. But, you know, there is a school of thought regarding comics art that bad, quote-unquote bad comics art makes for interesting art, and certainly Liefeld's art is that, and at this point in his career it is dynamic. You know, there is that Arthur Adams influence going on, but he's also developing much more of his own style, and his art certainly does look good when he inks it himself. And the last thing I want to mention before moving beyond the cover is how deep is the receding hairline on Cable there. It's way back on his head, almost giving a sense that he's wearing a mohawk there. His hair in the style of a mohawk. Looks pretty cool in my opinion, and distinctive of the character. So let's open this one up to the splash page, and we'll see here the creative team, Louise Simonson writer. This is her very last issue on New Mutants. The next creator credit is not for Rob Liefeld. Liefeld is on a break working on New Mutants number 98. And instead we have fill-in artist Guong Yap. So I didn't recognize the name back in the day or even now. And I had a guess to myself that he probably was an artist who might have done some work on Marvel Comics Presents stories, and I'm right about that. He did indeed work on some of those Marvel Comics Presents stories, you know, the 6 and 7 pagers. And also, what became of him afterwards? Well, it turns out that he went into animation. So he's a pretty solid artist, but not very dynamic in his style of art. Another one of these artists that in a certain sense has a kind of a DC Comics early 1980s style. Rather than someone who, you know, was reading and took to heart the lessons of How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way by John Buscema. In any case, it is competent art and storytelling in this issue by Guong Yap. Joe Rubinstein is the inker, Joe Rosen the letterer, and Steve Buccellato on colours. So the narrative captions here basically just catch everyone up with what's happened before this particular issue. The previous part, Uncanny X-Men 272. All of the mutants are free now. Storm is back in her adult body, and she has the power when she touches any mutant whose power was wiped by the Genoshan wipeout to restore their powers. So she started with Cyclops. Hodge has arrived. You can see him here. He's shaking off some masonry that fell on him after being attacked by Cyclops. And he says to Cyclops, "Your first shot was lucky, Cyclops. Your optic blast caught me unprepared. I didn't realize that the G-Engineer's mutant time bomb Storm had been catalyzed, nor that by her touch she had restored your power." So Storm is going to do a bit more of that in this particular issue. Turn the page. We got a pretty nice double page half spread here, and the title of the story, War, for this penultimate chapter of the crossover. And yeah, so you can see Cyclops letting rip with his optic blast there, even as Storm, on Cyclops' orders, runs to Jean Grey in order to restore her powers, which happens here because Cyclops' idea is he wants mutants to have their powers restored who can strike at a distance, strike Hodge at a distance. So Cyclops, ever the strategist, the general in the field, and thinking on his feet there, and thinking strategically in respect of how to deal with Hodge. But he thinks to himself as he launches that optic blast, "I knew Hodge was powerful, but I never thought that he could shrug off the full force of my optic blast. I hope to buy the others time, but it seems as if my time is running out." Okay, so dramatic. Let's see what happens next. So with Jean's telekinetic powers restored, she and Storm attack Hodge together. There's some nice lighting on Hodge's face there. I like that effect created there by the spotting of blacks. And he says to the trio attacking him, the three of you together are very powerful. But he really is a scenery chewing ham villain, not powerful enough. But he thinks to himself privately, and this is something I've observed about the way that Louise Simonson writes, she really does make use of what a character might say aloud versus what they think to themselves. So you get a sense of the inner and the outer with her characters. Luckily, he thinks to himself, there are just the three of them. I must skewer Storm, and quickly, before she can restore the others. So he sets off, fires out those shoulder spikes, but they are countered by our trio of mutants. And all the while Cyclops, or rather Storm here, is thinking, Hodge's force field stops us. Cyclops was right, I must activate the others' powers. And yet I dare not turn away from Hodge, lest he destroy those I hold dear. So they're in a tight bind up against Hodge, and suddenly, and this goes back to a plot of Cyclops's and Forge's, an explosion goes off, and that takes Hodge by surprise. It's his laboratory. So he phases through the floor in order to investigate. Or rather, no, what happens is the ceiling falls on top of him, and they're wondering if he's dead. No such luck. Cyclops notes that the monster phased through the floor seconds before the rubble would have buried him. So now it's time to take stock. That's a nice top-down shot there of the three of them talking together. And again, interesting use of a screen tone here on Cyclops' visor, and good spotting of blacks on his figure as well. So he explains about the secret plot of his and Forge's, how Forge created a robot autobomb and secretly released it to seek out the technological heart of the Citadel and destroy it. Forge chose to remain voluntarily unconscious to protect the bomb's discovery during one of Hodge's mind probes. And I think Storm, says Cyclops, that now it's time to wake Forge up. And so she does that, but in the meantime we have a little scene switch, and we pick up with the trio of Boom Boom, Richter, who do not have their mutant powers. They were wiped out by Wipeout, and Jubilee, who does have her powers. And they're following the Engineer and his mutate slave, let's call him a slave, who is digging a tunnel with his powers, also to as it turns out, to Hodge's laboratory. And just as they're arriving, or rather just as the mutate arrives at the laboratory, Forge's bomb goes off. So that's a nice little coincidence of something that had an effect in the first scene of the issue, and now we see it having its effect elsewhere down at the entrance of the laboratory. So the mutate is killed, but the Engineer is knocked unconscious. He's still alive. So Richter drags him into the laboratory, and they hear someone coming. Jubilee says someone's coming. Drag the Engineer out of sight behind the counter and like, hurry up, okay. So this is kind of like a horror movie. Reminds me of Halloween and Michael Myers, searching through a house while the teenagers are hiding from him and his deadly blades. And or I was also thinking of, even though it comes some years later, that scene of the raptors in Jurassic Park and the kids hiding from them. So we've got Hodge here in the background, and he's a monstrous figure, and he's investigating his laboratory, and the kids here in the foreground are really concerned not to be caught. It's Hodge, we're in his lair, says Richter. And Boom Boom thinks, oh, spit, please don't let him find us, please, I'll do anything, only please. And Jubilee thinks he's a little bit more pugnacious. He's ugly, yeah, and he's big and more powerful than all of us put together, but what else has he got going for him? This typical Jubilee from this era. So Hodge here is putting it together that he finds the remains of a tracker bomb, one of Forge's designs, I'll wager. He says it succeeded at its task, and yet it failed most miserably. It has destroyed much, but my computer's mainframe is still operative. So that's not the end of Hodge. And that will give me all the information and power that I need to win this little war. So the title of the story. I will find those responsible for this destruction and destroy them, every mutant on this island. I like that panel. That's a pretty good panel. So he throws the remains of the bomb towards them, but it doesn't hit any of them, and off he goes. Meanwhile, Boom Boom recognizes, her attention is caught by this little object. She picks it up, and there's a name on it. It's Warlock's name. And so she realizes it's all that's left of him, his ashes, so to speak. Now the G-Engineer has woken up, and Richter grabs him by the lapels and demands from him, "I've had it with you and Hodge and every Genoshan on this island. Take us to Wipeout. He's going to give me back my powers, and I'm going to use it to free our people and shake Hodge into scrap metal." But of course the thing is that Wipeout is dead. Hodge had him killed in order to frame havoc in the previous chapter of the crossover. So then we see Forge coming to, and it's Cyclops whispering here to him, Forge, or not whispering, but saying to him, "Forge, wake up, your spear has hit its mark." So Forge takes himself out of his trance, and he discovers that Hodge has ripped off his bionic hand and leg. And of course, Forge, however, will be able to recreate those, because that is his mutant power, to create inventions of any kind, or like designs from technology. That's his mutant power. He's a tinkerer, an inventor, and his mutant power basically augments that beyond normal human means. And this is nice, a kind of a callback to the days of the fall of the mutants and the love affair between Forge and Storm. And this is their being reunited here. "Storm, Aurora, you're restored to full adulthood and power," she says as she leans down and kisses him. And then there's this expression of her kind of emotion here with the little storm cloud above her. And then we get this, and think about it, it's kind of like a creepy, weird moment with Gambit there watching in the background. So Gambit is jealous of this relationship between Storm and Forge, but look at what he thinks here. This is a bit of a misstep, really. Despite obvious advantages, he thinks to himself, "Not so sure I like this change." Okay, fair enough. But then we realize what he means by advantages. "One side, mon ami. I think perhaps Storm's next kiss had best be mine." All right, a bit weird indeed. And then we have a little interview here between Storm and the Chief Magistrate Anderson, where she is explaining about what happened with the G-Engineer, that he worked things so that Storm only appeared to transform into a mutate. You were as much his secret weapon against Cameron Hodge as that time bomb was Forge's. So Storm is putting it together. The G-Engineer is acting against Hodge. And Magistrate Anderson says, "No matter what you think of him, Moreau is a true Genoshan patriot. He's certain Hodge will destroy our country, and he means to stop that monster at any cost. You were just one of the obstacles he placed in Hodge's path." So what's up next is that Cable, this is an issue of New Mutants, and he's developing his own little plan there, and he's saying he invites Forge to give him a hand with his hand. "Wouldn't mind having your assistance turning this scrap back into an arm, Forge. Gonna need it when we go to get Rain back." So time passes, and now we have Cyclops taking charge of all the freed mutants with their powers restored, and he comes up with a plan, and the plan is this. He's going to split the team. Cable, use Storm, Cannonball and Sunspot, locate and rescue Rain, then join the rest of us in our pursuit of Hodge. We'll split up, search from the bottom of the Citadel up, and Cyclops ends by saying, "Maintain radio silence as long as possible, and take care, Hodge isn't our only enemy." So now Wolverine asks what to do about Alex, because Wolverine knows that Alex thinks he's a magistrate. That's a callback to Uncanny X-Men 271 and Havoc and Wolverine's little battle in that particular issue. "Try to reason with him," says Cyclops, "or incapacitate him, or go through him, whatever it takes to get to Hodge." And speaking of Alex, we find him here, but he's had his memories of who he is restored in the previous chapter of X Factor. And he's thinking here, the explosion again has had another effect within the Citadel. It killed the guards that were taking him to a prison cell where he was going to wait until he was tried for killing Wipeout. This was all a frame that he was put in by Cameron Hodge. And you see, here is sort of it is a weakness of Louise Simonson's script, but it also is understandable in respect of the fact that she is trying to explain things for maybe readers of New Mutants who haven't picked up other issues of the crossover, who haven't picked up, maybe for financial reasons, issues of Uncanny X-Men or X-Factor where key things are taking place. And so Havoc is, in his thoughts, saying things to himself that it really isn't, credible, like a representation of his thoughts. It's expositional thinking where he says, there's no way Scott can know the truth. He must believe I'm still the victim of Janosian brainwashing and that I'm on Hodge's side, but I'm not. Finally, I'm free and fully myself. Why would he think that to himself? Of course he knows it. And I'll turn my plasma effect on Hodge with such fury I'll melt him into slag. Okay, well, hopefully, yes. So then the scene switches to Boom Boom, Rick, and Jubilee again. They're in the G-Engineer's darkened laboratory still after the explosion. And then there's a surprise visitor, which is Rain. And of course, her memory's been wiped. And so she attacks Richter, and he's shocked. He thinks to himself, such strength, such passionless strength of will, she'll strangle me. And yet I won't use my power to harm her, because they have a little romantic chemistry going on between them. So Rick asks Boom Boom and Jubilee to get Rain off her, and then the G-Engineer steps in and stops Rain's attack by commanding her to cease. So Rick says, that's all it takes now, G-Engineer, an order from you. What you see here is a strange little change in the quality of the artwork a little bit. Like all of the detail and the dynamism of the art kind of drops out a bit in the second half of the issue. And I wonder, is that to do with maybe a deadline crunch coming on, or what it might be. But certainly I noticed a little bit of a lack of invention in the remaining part of the issue from the artist. So there's a whole discovery here of Wipeout's body, murdered by Hodge, says the G-Engineer, who blamed it on the mutate Magistrate Summers. And so Boom Boom says, this means he can't restore our powers, so we're stuck this way, which is like a total drag on us, not to mention Rain. But of course Storm is out there and she can restore the powers, so there's going to be a way to do that. Jubilee here threatens to send a load of plasmoid fireworks down the G-Engineer's throat unless he changes Rain back. And the G-Engineer is flabbergasted to change her back. I'm afraid, young lady, that will be impossible. But just at that moment, Storm arrives and everybody is surprised to see Cable, Cannonball, and Roberto too. So Storm flies at Rain and Richter and asks them to take her hand, which restores everybody's powers. And there's an interesting development in respect of Rain. So, as she says here, or thinks to herself, first of all, 'tis a miracle. In this form I can think again, can react, not just record. My body as Wolf Girl, it's different, I'm larger. So the G-Engineer explains, my gene mode process has released your innate strength, your unrealized power. So Rain says she's going to use it to avenge the horror that he's done to her. But then the G-Engineer corrects her. Hodge was watching. I did what I could. In your human form, you will always be helpless and mutate, mindless and obedient. But as a werewolf, you will be stronger, more powerful than you ever were. And you will have the will to direct your anger and the mind to know that it is not I who am your real enemy. But she puts it together, Cameron Hodge. Actually, that's a pretty decent panel there. A good 3/4 profile on a very bestial looking werewolf form, Rain. So she says to the G-Engineer, you've accomplished your purpose. Cameron Hodge will die. by my own teeth and claws if need be for what he's done to me and Warlock and all of us. Okay, so a big boast there. Let's see how it turns out. The more interesting part here is picking up with Cameron Hodge. That's also a nice little panel there. I like the use of the screen tone. Elsewhere in the Citadel, as the mutants stalk Hodge, he stalks the stalkers. His mind is an amalgam of technology. His memory is computer enhanced. Internal maps and sensors allow him to scan beyond his human senses, to search for the mutants beyond the four walls which enclose him, and he finds them. So there he is. And he's got this ability to phase through solid objects, looking ahead and behind. It'll never occur to them to look above. Hodge phases through the floor here. And then it's time to attack. So it's a horror coming from above. Yeah, that's a pretty little cool, or that's a cool little moment. So everyone goes into attack mode. And yeah, it's Iceman here who says, Banshee, shatter his back hump. I think that's what holds his phasing unit. So just as Banshee is about to target that area specifically, his mouth is closed by a bolo-like weapon, which begins to choke and strangle Banshee. So Psylocke intervenes in order to help him out, thinking to herself, my powers are telepathic and useless against Hodge, as our previous encounter proved. In Uncanny X-Men 272, but I've strength enough to free Banshee and to telepathically warn the others. Sorry, the encounter in 271 proved that. Cyclops, we've located Hodge. He phases. Forge thinks the back unit. So she gets that message through. And meantime, Gambit is energizing a chunk of ice and hurling it at Hodge, but it explodes against Hodge's carapace with a silent, devastating impact, even as Forge's weapon hits Hodge full blast. But Hodge is impervious to energy weapons, so Beast launches himself right behind Hodge and starts pulling out his technology, saying to Hodge, you'll be an empty tank with no one to command it, after he's ripped out enough wires. That's a pretty cool panel actually as well. But some of the pages, like I was saying earlier, like this page and this page, especially this page, not quite as good. So there's a kind of an unevenness of quality throughout this issue, and it just makes me wonder, again, are the pages that are that bit more like less inventive, less dynamic, ones that were drawn at the very end of the process, just in advance of the printing deadline, perhaps. So, meanwhile, Storm and the G-Engineer follow Cable, Boom Boom, Rick, Jubilee, Sunspot and Cannonball into Hodge's nearly destroyed lab. And Rain finds the remains of Warlock, so that upsets her. All the New Mutants are upset about Warlock, especially Richter. He says, Warlock was the kindest, gentlest, most innocent among us, and he died because that mutant-hating monster decided to take Locke's power. Let's see how he reacts when we take his. So they start trashing all of the tech and computer systems, which are basically the source of Hodge's power. So as they're doing that, Hodge realizes that that's what's happening. In the moment of victory, Hodge freezes as information system after information system begins to shut down. So he says aloud, my computer functions are failing. They're in my lab and they will destroy me. So he phases through the floor and he's on his way to the lab. And from the ceiling of his lab, 4 projectiles find their marks. So he uses those deadly shoulder spikes to pin Jubilee and Sunspot against the wall of the lab. But they note that they have weakened him. See, this is a more dynamic page here. This is a good open border panel of Boom Boom sending off a time bomb. She calls it the biggest one she's ever made, and she hopes to destroy and finish Hodge with it. And she does have an impact, like she explodes his leg, blows it off. So he's not happy about that. He calls her an insect and threatens to pin her to the wall and says he'll repay her in kind. But what I don't get is he pins her to the wall. Of course, like the plot requires it. But why not just kill them? Why not just send those spikes right into the hearts of his enemies? Like, that's the smart thing to do. But Hodge, I suppose, is driven by his sadistic desire for revenge, and he wants to enjoy his victory. So that's why he keeps them alive. This is the point that Rain, in her werewolf form, goes up against Hodge and starts pulling more wires out of the back of his head. And she does some damage. And Cannonball gets into the action, but he's caught by Hodge's tentacles. So Storm and Richter unite their powers in order to free Cannonball on Cable's orders there, which is a nice point. So Cannonball hits the floor, and Hodge realizes, his real problem is Storm. You, Storm. It is you who are to blame. You have restored their powers. You're the author of my troubles, and before I leave this room, I'll see you dead. But actually, he's an idiot. Again, not just is he not using his shoulder spikes to kill his opponents, but also to frame havoc, he killed Wipeout. Instead of keeping Wipeout around, should he require him in the future if the mutants were ever to get free? Of course, the explanation is he's so proud and hubristic that he imagined the inevitability of his total victory. But even so, I maintain he is an idiot for having killed Wipeout and not someone else that he could frame. Just a regular, ordinary magistrate and frame havoc for that. So Storm dodges away from his blast, and at this point, the G-Engineer, we get his little redemption here where he uses this, it looks like a shoulder-mounted double bazooka, and hits Hodge with one of the projectiles from it, but Hodge grabs him with the tentacle and snaps his neck. You can just see the little crack there. This is a nice panel here as well, with Hodge mostly in silhouette. That's pretty good. Yeah, so as I said, I've said a couple of times now, and this is the last time I'll say it, the art is uneven in quality. Some of these pages have a more inventive and dynamic and interesting and thoughtful layout, and a handful of them are kind of a little bit staid and, dare I say it, boring in respect of the layouts and drawings. So the G-Engineer gets off the second projectile, a direct hit on Hodge, who says, "You've hurt me more than the others," but the G-Engineer is dead. So Cable catches his corpse. Richter dodges Hodge's tail, and this is a nice little sequence here where Hodge phases through the floor again. "You've harmed me, mutants," he says, "but not nearly as much as I, in time, will hurt you." So he's gone. As Cable says, he's somewhere in the building. He can't have gone far. Wherever he's hiding, we'll find him. So last page now, we have Rain once again being given the ashes or remains of Warlock, and she's determined to scatter them on Doug's grave. "I know 'tis what both of them would have wanted." So Boom Boom says, "Sure, Rain, sure." Because Rain is going to go off with the others to tackle Hodge for a final time, because Cable has decided that the injured New Mutants, the ones who were spiked, should remain behind. So he says here, "Boom Boom, you let's see. I know how you feel, Boom Boom. You, Sam, Berto, and Jubilee help rip Hodge apart. Now you want to finish him, but you're too injured to engage in further conflict." So they're out, and that's why Rain gives Boom Boom the ashes to hold on to. And she says, "Just punch a few extra holes in Hodge for us when you see him, okay?" And Cable says, "We will. Working together, we've ripped a big hole in Hodge and his plans for Genosha. Now we're going to hunt him down and finish what we started." So that's Cable, Storm, Richter, and Rain going after Hodge. So it's X Factor issue 62 is the last chapter, the dramatic conclusion of the X-Tinction agenda. So Hodge, it's going to be the final battle against him in that final issue. No letters page in this, but this was Louise Simonson's final issue scripting The New Mutants, a title she took over after Chris Claremont left it. And it's all down to a creative conflict with the artist behind this cover, that is Rob Liefeld. So the very next issue of New Mutants, number 98, Liefeld is both penciler and plotter, and Fabian Nicieza comes on board as scripter of Rob Liefeld's plots only. So I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on New Mutants number 97. Let me know your thoughts on this issue in the comment section to the video. If you enjoyed my review and commentary, please like the video on YouTube. It really does help the channel. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.